Hello dear people, today we have an interesting video about the Jewish history and the settlement adventure of the Jewish people before the Second World War process.
Before the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, the question of where to create a homeland for the Jewish people sparked numerous proposals, debates, and diplomatic experiments. Many Zionists primarily focused on the historical land of Palestine. But the road to statehood was long, difficult, and filled with alternatives. In times of rising anti-Semitism, persecution, and forced migration, Jewish leaders, colonial powers, and international organizations considered various regions around the world as potential Jewish homelands. This video explores the most significant proposals made for a Jewish homeland before Israel was established. One of the most well-known alternatives to Palestine was the so-called Uganda Plan. In 1903, following a series of pogroms in the Russian Empire that caused horrific suffering among Jews, the British government proposed granting a piece of land in East Africa, today part of Kenya, as a territory for Jewish settlement. British colonial officials called it the Uganda Scheme, although the area in question was not actually in Uganda proper. Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern political Zionism, brought the proposal to the Sixth Zionist Congress in Basel. His suggestion shocked many delegates. For some, the plan represented a practical way to rescue Jews under immediate threat. For others, it was a betrayal of the central Zionist vision, returning to the ancestral homeland in Palestine. After intense debate, a delegation was sent to investigate the territory, but the Seventh Zionist Congress in 1905 officially rejected the Uganda Plan. Despite being short-lived, this proposal triggered a major ideological split among early Zionists. In the late 19th century, a Jewish philanthropic experiment began in Argentina, largely due to the efforts of Baron Maurice de Hirsch, a wealthy Jewish financier. He established the Jewish Colonization Association to help Russian and Eastern European Jews escape persecution by settling them on agricultural lands in South America. Several colonies were established, especially in the province of Entre Rios, and thousands of Jews migrated to these settlements. The goal was not to build a Jewish state per se, but to provide a safe haven and promote economic independence for Jews. These Argentine colonies became known as Jewish gauchos, and although the project had mixed results, it laid the groundwork for the idea that Jews could establish autonomous communities in distant lands outside of Europe. In 1928, the Soviet Union launched its own version of a Jewish homeland in the far eastern region of Siberia, near the Chinese border. The area, known as Birobidzhan, was declared the Jewish Autonomous Oblast in 1934. The idea was to offer Soviet Jews a region where they could live, work the land, and develop a secular Yiddish-speaking socialist culture within the USSR. In 1924, the Politburo decided to create a region in Russia for Jews. An initial plan, which had gained considerable support both in Russia and the West, was to establish this region in Crimea, but the settlement was changed to Birobidzhan because Crimea was already well populated. Birobidzhan was a harsh and remote area, with extreme winters and limited infrastructure. The Soviet government encouraged Jewish migration to the region and even launched propaganda campaigns promoting it as a Soviet Zion. Some Jewish families did relocate, but the experiment struggled. Stalin's purges and growing anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union further undermined the project. Today, Birobidzhan still exists as a political entity, but its Jewish population is tiny, and the dream of a vibrant Jewish cultural center there has long faded. One of the most interesting proposals for Jewish relocation was the infamous Madagascar Plan, promoted by various European powers at different times, most notably by Nazi Germany in the 1930s. The idea was to forcibly relocate European Jews to the island of Madagascar, off the coast of East Africa, which was then a French colony. The plan was originally floated by some Polish officials in the 1920s who were eager to reduce their Jewish population, but it gained more traction under Hitler's regime. Nazi leaders viewed the Madagascar Plan as a final solution to the so-called Jewish problem before the Holocaust took the form of industrial extermination. The plan was never implemented, largely due to wartime logistics and naval blockades. The Madagascar Plan remains a dark reminder of how the idea of Jewish relocation was weaponized by anti-Semitic regimes. In the early 1900s, British officials discussed the possibility of establishing a Jewish settlement in El Arish, a town in the Sinai Peninsula. British Zionist agents explored the land and held discussions with Egyptian authorities. The idea was to offer a closer alternative to Palestine, but it faced opposition from both local Egyptian leaders and Jewish settlers, who found the region agriculturally unviable. The El Arish proposal never progressed beyond the exploratory stage, but it reflects how multiple locations in or near the Middle East were considered. In the early 1940s, the US government considered a proposal to resettle Jewish refugees in Alaska. The idea was put forward by Secretary of the Interior Harold Ickes, and it became known as the Slattery Report, named after Undersecretary Harry Slattery. The proposal aimed to save European Jews from Nazi persecution by encouraging immigration to Alaska, which at the time was a sparsely populated US territory. However, the plan was not about state building. It was framed as a humanitarian emergency measure. Despite being supported by some officials, it faced significant public opposition and ultimately failed to gain congressional approval. In the 1930s and 1940s, as Nazi aggression escalated, some proposals emerged to create Jewish settlements in South America and the Caribbean. The Dutch government briefly considered relocating Jews to Suriname, while the British explored options in British Guiana, which is modern-day Guyana. These proposals were driven largely by desperation during the refugee crisis, and neither became formal government policies. They never offered statehood or autonomy, only temporary refuge. Still, they are worth noting as part of the wider global scramble to find safe havens for Jews when few countries were willing to accept them. After World War II, as Holocaust survivors sought to reach Palestine, Cyprus became a holding site. The British, who then controlled both Cyprus and Palestine under separate mandates, used Cyprus to detain tens of thousands of Jewish refugees attempting to immigrate to Palestine illegally. While Cyprus was never proposed as a permanent Jewish homeland, its role as a refugee center during the 1940s makes it part of the historical geography of Jewish displacement and temporary settlement. The conditions in the British-run camps were poor, and international pressure eventually led to their closure as Israel's independence approached. During the 1930s, Japan explored a curious and little-known idea known as the Fugu Plan, named after the dangerous Japanese delicacy, pufferfish, which is safe only if prepared carefully. Japanese officials, influenced by some white Russian émigrés and anti-Semitic European literature, believed that Jews had global financial power and could be useful to Japan's imperial ambitions. Their plan was to settle Jewish refugees fleeing Europe in the Japanese-occupied region of Manchuria and possibly Shanghai. The Japanese hoped this would attract international Jewish capital and influence to Japan's side. Although several hundred Jews were allowed to settle in Shanghai, and diplomats like Chiune Sugihara in Lithuania issued transit visas that saved thousands of lives, the grand idea of a Japanese-backed Jewish autonomous zone never materialized. Still, the Fugu Plan remains one of the most bizarre and ironic examples of a cynical attempt to leverage Jewish suffering for geopolitical gain. Among the lesser-known but serious proposals for Jewish resettlement was the Kimberley Plan in Australia. In the late 1930s, as Nazi persecution escalated in Europe, a Jewish organization called the Freeland League for Jewish Territorial Colonization, led by Russian Jewish activist Isaac Nachman Steinberg, proposed establishing a large-scale Jewish settlement in the Kimberley region of northern Western Australia. This vast and underpopulated area was seen as a place where tens of thousands of Jews, up to 75,000, could find refuge and build a self-sustaining agricultural community. The goal was not to create a sovereign state, but rather an autonomous, Jewish-run zone within the bounds of the Australian government. The plan gained some support from local officials and developers who saw potential economic benefits. However, the Australian federal government rejected the proposal in 1944, citing concerns about national unity, assimilation, and the potential backlash of concentrated ethnic migration. While the Kimberley Plan was never realized, It stands as a fascinating chapter in the global search for Jewish refuge, showing that even the most remote corners of the world were considered in the desperate quest for safety during the darkest years of Jewish history. Beyond Alaska, which we already discussed under the Slattery Report, there were other suggestions about settling Jews in underpopulated or rural parts of the United States. Some ideas floated during the 1930s and early 1940s included areas like North Dakota and South Dakota, Texas and Arizona, Louisiana's bayous, New York, and parts of New Jersey. These suggestions often came from private citizens, Jewish organizations, or local officials sympathetic to the Jewish plight. However, the U.S. federal government remained largely restrictive on immigration during this period. Public anti-Semitism, economic concerns during the Great Depression, and strict immigration quotas made large-scale resettlement nearly impossible. Proposals were never adopted at the national level, and tragically, many Jewish refugees were turned away during the Holocaust. Despite all these alternatives, Zionist leaders and the broader Jewish population maintained a strong emotional, religious, and historical attachment to Palestine. For most Zionists, settling in Uganda, Birobidzhan, or Madagascar was unthinkable. Their goal was not just to find any land, but to return to their land. The rejection of the Uganda Plan in 1905 reaffirmed that commitment. The Holocaust further strengthened the push for a Jewish state in Palestine. After the war, global sympathy for Jewish survivors grew, and pressure mounted on Britain and the United Nations to resolve the question of Jewish statehood. In 1947, the UN voted to partition Palestine into Jewish and Arab states, leading to the creation of Israel in May 1948. The journey to Israel's founding was not straightforward. It was shaped by persecution, exile, ideology, and international politics. From the frozen lands of Siberia to the jungles of Madagascar, various corners of the world were proposed as places where Jews could settle, survive, or thrive. But in the end, only one location united Jewish history, faith, and political will: Palestine. The story of these alternative proposals offers a powerful reminder of how fragile and uncertain the path to nationhood can be, and how history could have turned out very differently.